Hello, welcome to everybody for our webinar today on product management and Ask Us Anything session with Anand Subramani and Jiaona Zhang, both experienced product executives. Anand right now is the VP of product at Path, and Jay-Z is the VP of product at Webflow. So today's session will be Q&A driven, so you should see a little Q&A box in your interface. Just type a question in there. It's a short session. We may not get to all the questions during it, but keep the questions coming. And with that, I think actually we'll just get it kicked off so we don't waste any more time. So Anand, we spoke this time last year, and I should mention there are links to our previous webinars as well if you want to see what Anand and Jay-Z have had to say before about product management. One question that came up last year was how has product management changed with the move to fully remote work? And you said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, a small organization has to act like a big organization. It's harder to run things ad hoc when everyone is remote. So you need to develop the processes and deliberate communication practices that you'd expect in a larger organization. I love this answer because it related to your core principle of the product manager being the glue in an organization responsible for inter and intra-team communication. So a year on, is there anything you would add to that answer? Any new insights?
Sure. For a tiny bit of context, Path is remote first and remote forever. So this is a thing that we have had to figure out as a company. Two things that really jump out to me. One of them is about, the first is about asynchronous and synchronous communication. Asynchronous communication is talking over Slack, or it's writing emails, or it's writing documents. Synchronous usually means in person. My lived experience with this is synchronous communication is much higher bandwidth. If there's a complicated topic or something you need to work through with someone, it is so much faster and so much more effective to, quote, get in a room with them, whether that means a virtual conference or a physical room. So I think that, 2 years into remote work, one of the things I think has become even more important for product managers is to know which mode to be in and make it really easy to be in the appropriate one. A tactical example of what that means for us, we use Slack and Zoom as our tools of communication. There's a magic command in Slack /Zoom that automatically starts a conference. We use that all the time. I probably use it 25 times a day. So it's making sure that you're not forcing yourself into a 6-paragraph conversation with someone when really what you need is a 5-minute conversation. I think it's a high premium on knowing which mode you should be in. The second one is, this just continues to be more and more true, but documenting things is even more important than it ever was. And it was always important, but I would say most companies, ours included, tend to do this poorly historically, with people being in different time zones and often having never met each other. Writing things down is more important than it's ever been, whether that means making a little video, recording a Zoom, making a Loom, putting it on YouTube, writing, whatever it is. Archiving and saving that information is more important than it's ever been.
Thanks, Anand. Jay-Z, is there anything you would add to Anand's answer?
Sure. I do say that /Zoom as a shortcut command in Slack is probably one of the best tips I've personally gotten, and I give my team. So if you don't know that, write that down. To add on this concept of really documenting decision making, it is something that is going to help you move a lot faster. It might not feel like it at the very beginning when you're writing that document, but as your company scales, as new people come on, having that documentation, whether it's, this is my PRD, my product requirements document, this is the meeting notes of when we had to make a really important decision, this is the decision we made. Having a wiki for your company where all of this can live for the product team, for your area, all of those things are just becoming more and more important.
That's great, and I want to remind people to continue to submit questions in the Q&A box. We're already getting some great ones, but I want to stay a little bit here on this topic and follow up. We have a good follow-up question, and it's related again to one of your core principles. So Jay-Z, you talk about bringing the donuts, right? The PM's responsibility for team morale. How have you been doing that when everybody's remote? What are some of the challenges and opportunities there?
Yeah, I think the first thing to stress is that bringing the donuts is really just a concept, right? You can physically bring in donuts, but the concept is how do you make sure that your team feels appreciated, they feel cohesive. And so even in a remote world, you can do this, whether that is through still physical things like mailing people thank you notes. I know that might feel old school and old fashioned, but it actually really can mean something. In today's world, it's very digital and remote. We did something recently where we actually mailed people Polaroids and had them take pictures of their family, of things that they loved, and then we sent them back. We had them send the pictures back, and then we digitized it. And so just creating that connection. Another thing that you can do with your team is, bringing the donuts really means celebrating great work, right? And cheering your team on. So that can take the form of props, right? So in your Slack channel or email or whatever you're using, really celebrating those moments, shouting out people who've done a really great job, who've done something really difficult, who've gone above and beyond. Those are types of things that you can do in a world where bringing the donuts is a little bit harder when we're all physically together.
Anand, is there anything you would add to this idea of bringing the donuts in this remote world?
Just one, which is, this might sound corny, but don't be afraid to formalize the concept. One of the things that we've done that has worked pretty well is we have an explicit concept of a rotating person every month who's in charge of doing something team-oriented and team-related. And they plan an event or totally up to them. It's their discretion. But we formalized a little bit. And while it might sound silly and might sound a little bit dumb, people walk out of those and they're like, actually, I had a really good time meeting my coworkers. So the team building and the team bonding event of this can also be formalized a bit to make sure that it is somebody's job and that you are actually doing it.
And Anand, I want to stay with you for a little bit longer. So we're getting a lot of questions now about the core. What are the core skills that you need to improve on as a PM, and what are the common mistakes? And so I want to try and bring these together around the core, core responsibilities of a PM, which is knowing your customer. So you argue you've got to really be the customer's advocate in the organization. So could you talk a little bit about what that means, and what are the common pitfalls that young PMs or new PMs make when they're trying to know the customer?
Sure. In terms of what it means that one of the things you are uniquely responsible for is representing your customer inside the building as you are making products or as you're going through some prioritization process. In terms of the most common way that I see this fail, especially for new product managers, it's doing a very large project to know your customer and then assuming that you're done. It's doing a bunch of research, and then a year from now, you're saying, well, we did that research project a year ago. We already know our customer. This is a thing you have to do to perpetuity, and it requires constant refreshing this information. So I think it's about building systems where you are constantly connecting with your customers all the time, even all the way up to an executive level. I do 3 to 5 customer calls every week, and will till the end of time. Just making sure that you have a consistent check-in with your customers, not just a one-time check-in with your customers.
Anand, can I ask a quick follow-up on that? Are those customer calls the same as when you're doing focus group work, as when you're doing customer interviews, or are these different level of formality or casualness? I know this is a common. How do you build up that skill of learning about your customers? So it'd be great to talk a little bit more about the structure of those customers.
It really depends. I'd say there's definitely a few different archetypes. One archetype is an escalation. A customer had some frustrating experience. I've sort of put the word out to people on our team that if someone has a frustrating experience with the product, you can put them in touch with me directly. So there's definitely one archetype that's, I had a problem, I want to talk to a very senior person on the team, I want to feel heard, and I also want to know that you're taking your problem seriously. And this is actually really phenomenal for sort of cutting through stuff that gets lost in the organization, where nobody in the organization feels empowered to fix it. I can talk to a customer and say, great, we're fixing this tomorrow. That's one archetype. I'd say a second archetype is I have a topic that I'm interested in, and I want to do something exploratory about it. At Path, for example, we're starting to think about how we can better support therapists. I have calls over the next few weeks with people who are not Path customers, but are therapists who have recently started their own practice. And I have a script that I've written where I'm going to go in and sort of talk about a topic that's on my mind. The last one, before I kick it over to Jay-Z, is sort of informal, like there isn't a specific thing you want to talk about. And here I have a script that I usually write and just keep running through about, tell me what's working well in the product. Tell me what's not working well. Tell me what you wish existed. Tell me if you recommend it to a friend. It's really just a basic overview of what's going on. and then how you use it in your day-to-day life. There's a lot of day in the life type questions and how you make use of it questions.
That's great, and that's really helpful. Jay-Z, is there anything you would add to the sort of knowing your customer skill?
Yeah, what I would say here, and I'm going to pivot a little bit to some of the questions that I do see coming in, which are really around, how do you transition your career, right? If you're doing X role, if you're doing operations, if you're doing business stuff, how do you transition into the product management role? When you can really understand your customer, right? So whether you're working on QA or whether you are working on operations, but you take the time to deeply understand what your customer needs, that gives you an advantage in making that transition, because product management really is about understanding that user and really knowing what are their pain points, what are they really struggling with. So I just wanted to address that a little bit. I know that those are some of the questions that are coming in. The other piece, and I also see people asking about, hey, I have a business background. I'm currently in consulting, or I went to business school. How do I make that transition? The other piece of the product management role is not just understanding your user, but it's really understanding the business context. Is there an opportunity here? Yes, there is user pain. And if we built something, we could capture, we can serve that user pain, but also capture a real opportunity in the market. And so when you lean into both of those, the deep understanding of the user and that opportunity for the business, that's when you really provide value as a product manager. And so that is what you can lean into based on your respective backgrounds in order to transition into the product management role.
That's really great. And I wanted to follow up on that. So Jay-Z, maybe sticking with you here, this is a question that came in that I thought was a nicely worded, which is, if we do a little pre-mortem on a product manager who's just started the role and now they're really struggling, let's say 6 months in, what would you say, what is it that's causing them to struggle? What do you typically see as a new PM struggling in those first 6 months of their role?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, a lot of times the PM role at a given company is not well defined. And that is because the PM role can be a little bit different based on the company, based on your product, based on your users, and what that company needs. And so one of the biggest reasons why new PMs might be struggling is because their role definition and what they're responsible is not necessarily clear, not just to them, but also to the organization more broadly. And so one of the things that I'd really encourage new PMs is take the time, work with your manager, and really define what success looks like. And if you do take our course, you can really start to see this is what it means to really own the product lifecycle. This is what it really means to be successful. And so taking some of those tips, you can actually write down, hey, this is what success looks like as a new PM, in my first 90 days, in my first 6 months, in my first year. So that's one thing. I think another thing is, there are times, actually, it's quite easy to be on projects where it's not clear what user problem you're solving for. Or you can be on a project where, even though there's user pain, there isn't a clear business opportunity. So even if you built something that's delightful, it's actually not going to have a lasting impact on the business. And so when both of those things are not true for your project, that is also a reason why things can go awry, and how people could be not so successful in their first year. And so really just understanding, having the tools to understand, is that happening here with my project, with what I'm working on? That's another big thing to really get right in order to be successful.
Anand, is there anything you would add to this? What do you see as the major struggles if you're doing a pre-mortem for a new PM after 6 months? They're really struggling. What's causing?
I think this is a manifestation of Jay-Z's first point, but it also addresses some of the other comments that have been brought up in the question submissions. It's really easy as a new PM to be entirely reactive instead of proactive. Boss comes to you and says, do this. Founder of the company comes to you and says, what if we did this thing? And you spend all of your time responding to outside requests and no time taking your projects and moving your projects forward. So I think there's a bunch of questions here about what are some of the skills required to know if you will be a successful product manager, and what are some of the skills to start working on now. I think one of the absolute core skills to be successful at this role is being able to center yourself on your job is to deliver value to customers and to customers and the business simultaneously. You do that by making stuff. And you need to be super proactive about taking things from start to finish, and not just about being responsive to whatever the organization happens to be asking today. it's very easy for organizations to generate a lot of chaos, and you need to wrangle that. But if that becomes your full-time job, you're not moving your projects forward.
And there's a question that came in that I think is a really nice follow-on to this, which is, again, another one of the core skills that you identify as being able to influence without authority. So how do you get buy-in for your role? How do you influence when you're getting all these requests coming in and you need to build some space to proactively pursue your projects? How do you influence without authority? I know that's $1 million question. If you had an easy answer, you know, it would be a different world. But what are some of the strategies and tactics that you use for influencing without authority?
Everyone very much develops a big part of their own personal style on this. I think a big one that I learned early in my career is you can be responsive to sort of a bunch of these requests coming in without it taking up all of your time. So the influence without authority piece is sometimes learning to gently redirect things to the right place, or to let something sit longer than it should, or not get back to something right away so that you are focusing on the most important thing. So I think the influence without authority piece is all about striking this delicate line of getting the rest of the organization what it needs to continue, without having that eat up all of your hours in the day. If anybody here is a product manager at a larger company, I'm guessing you spend almost all of your hours on the day interfacing with the rest of the organization, and it's about being defensive to get some of that time back.
Jay-Z, what would you add to this idea of influencing authority? Without authority? It's easy to influence with authority. Without authority, what are some of your tactics and strategies?
Yes. So we do say this, which is being a PM is not a solo sport. It is a team sport, right? So you are a PM, you will have an engineering manager or partner or tech lead, you will have a design partner, you'll have a lot of other stakeholders. And so a large part of the influence without authority is having strong relationships with your team, with your partners, right? And knowing when it is you need to push something forward versus you need to encourage your teammate to own something and push it forward. And so while you don't manage all the designers on the team, your design manager, who's your partner, does. While you don't manage all the engineers on your team, the engineering manager on your team does, right? So you can, when you have those relationships, you can influence those particular stakeholders to then directly manage those who are solid line reporting up to them to get things done. So I think that's a huge piece. And then I think cross-functionally, this is across the team, the PM team, while does feel kind of lonely in terms of like you are the PM in your area, there isn't really another PM, you are usually part of a PM organization, right? So there's another PM on other projects, you have group PMs, directors, VPs, so on and so forth. And so your PM team is a really huge asset. Bringing things early and often to the PM team, finding best practices for that PM team to really gelled, cohesive and synced in their strategy, that really helps you get things done. Because instead of you constantly trying to get a million stakeholders aligned, you can leverage the PMs across the organization to all move in unison. And so that is a huge piece of also creating that network effect and influencing across the company.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and it's always one of the things I think we all struggle with. It's one of the hardest skills. I want to pivot, so I do want to save some time because we're getting so many of those questions around how do I transition and what does it mean, what does it mean to be a PM? But there is one other question that came in that I want to ask you, Jay-Z, before pivoting to that question. And that's, is there a difference, or what is the difference between being a PM for a new product and potentially a new product in a new industry? We got a question, if there's no industry for this, what are the benchmarks, versus being a product manager when you're coming into a company, maybe the PM for an established product. So what the core question here is there, and what is the difference between being a PM for a new product and an established product?
Yeah, I'll start with first the similarities, right? So as a PM, regardless of what product you're on, you have to deeply understand your users. Again, we're gonna sound like a broken record, and also the business opportunity. If you don't understand that, whether you're building something brand new or you're trying to add to an existing product, but shape it, evolve it in the way that is most impactful, you can't do either of those successfully if you don't have a fundamental understanding of who are you building for, what do they need, and am I going to actually have a meaningful impact there such that it becomes a business opportunity. That being said, there are definitely some differences, right? So with a new product, the things I would really advise PMs to really focus on is, what is the state of the world today in terms of just alternatives? Who are the competitors that you think your audience is going to be using? If there are no competitors, what are the workaround solutions that people are kind of gluing together that you think you can do a much better job at? Those are the things you really look at when you're building something 0 to 1. When you're building something that is more established, you actually have the benefit of having so much data. You don't have to necessarily go outside of the company and try to do these like benchmarks or approximations. You can actually work with your data team. You can go directly and see, how are people using these features in the past? How do I segment my cohorts? What is working? What isn't working? What is the data, the logging? Our charts really say about what's going on here. And so that's a big difference that I think when you're working on an existing product to really leverage and focus on so that you can actually make the best decisions going forward for how to evolve it.
That's great. Anand, would you add anything to this question? The kind of established product versus new.
I'll do 20 seconds, and then I think a lot of people are interested in how they become a PM. So 20 seconds on this. Just expanding on what Jay-Z said at the beginning, I think a huge difference is a new product fits more into the context of the rest of their life, and an existing product often fits into the context of itself. If you're a PM working on a feature at a huge established product, a Google or Microsoft or whatever, a lot of your work will be, how does this thing fit into the other parts of the product that we control? And if you are in the former category, it's all about fitting your product into the rest of their life. Are they going to use things at work or at home, for personal or for play? What are the replacement solutions? What are competitors? So the context in which your thing fits is pretty different, and that puts a different premium on where you spend your time.
Perfect. Thank you, Anand. And Jay-Z, I want to come back to you. So again, lots and lots of questions about how do I become a PM? And you've already addressed some of it, finding that marriage between business, what's good for the business and knowing your customer. What other advice would you provide in terms of making that transition from different roles into the product management role? What should people be thinking about?
Yeah. I think someone actually brought this up in chat where they said, it is really tricky because one of the best ways to get a job is to already have the PM title, and it becomes this catch-22. So that is true. But a couple ways to think about this is, first, if you're at a company and you're really excited to transition to a PM role at that particular company, I think what you do is really find that wedge where you're adding value to an existing team, whether it's more on the business side, whether it's more on the understanding the user side, right? Like I am a designer and I really understand the user, transitioning from that into product management, or I'm a data scientist and I really understand, how our product works, but also the intersection of how our users are using this product. That is something that's an asset for you to transition into the PM role. If you're going to do this at a completely new company, right? If you don't see those opportunities at your existing company, one of the things that Anand and I do advise people to do is sometimes when you go smaller, there are more opportunities to really just wear multiple hats. When you're at a small company, you might be doing a little bit of operations and you might be doing a little bit of product. And over time, you can do more product and officially become a PM. And so that's another opportunity to think about, which is, can you find it at your existing company, or do you need to potentially look at a different company and based on the opportunities at that company to make that transition?
Anand, I want to give you a second to add anything to Jay-Z's answer, but I do also want to ask you about some of the formal learning experiences that you and Jay-Z have put together around classes. So anything you would add to Jay-Z's response before talking about kind of formal ways of learning about PM?
Just an expansion of her first point, which is, if you're new to the product discipline, you probably don't know a lot about product management. You have to bring some other asset. You need to be super intellectually honest about the other asset that you bring. The most common two assets that I see if we will transition to this are one, people who know a lot about the customer. Most common roles here are sales roles, customer service roles, customer support roles. People who spend all day talking to the customer tend to know a lot about the customer. You may not know about product management, but that's the trade. You know a ton about the customer, somebody else will teach you about product management. The other one is on the business side. Some of this comes out of sales, some of it comes out of business school, some of it comes out of consulting. It's knowing a ton about both how this business works and how business works in general. And again, the trade is I bring that skill and you teach me product management.
Well, that's a perfect segue. So I guess my follow-up question, and we're running out of time. I know you both have to go back to work, and everyone else probably on this call does too. You and Jay-Z have put together both a asynchronous course, a self-paced course on product management. You're also teaching a graduate level course at Stanford that is open to enrollment. And if people are interested, there's a link there in the interface. You can click on that, you can enroll. Can you talk about those two courses and what the different audiences are? And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to launch a poll just to learn a little bit more about our audience and what kind of learning experiences they're interested in, which can help us refine what we offer.
Sure. I'd say the biggest difference between the two of them is the self-paced online class is sort of like the video analog of a textbook. You're doing it by yourself. You're doing it at your own pace. The time commitment is relatively low. It's on the order of 12 hours. It's whatever you put in is what you will get out. But I would think of it as sort of it's like a textbook. The in-person graduate class is much more expansive. You will work with a team, which is better representative of how product managers work in real life. You will take a real project from start to finish. You will go through product reviews and design reviews. It's much longer, so it's probably on the order of 5 to 15 hours a week of work. So think of the online class as sort of the equivalent of getting a textbook and reading a textbook, and the other one is more like going to school for an entire quarter on how to do this well.
Jay-Z, is there anything you would add to the differences in those two formal learning experiences?
I mean, I think those are the key ones. Boiling it down to your time commitment, right? Like how much time of your day can you actually carve out to really spend with this? If you don't have a lot of time, we definitely recommend the online version. It is self-paced and it will give you a lot of the frameworks you need, but at in a digestible way at the pace you need. And then the other one is when you're like, I want to go all in, I want a more immersive experience, and I learn best by partnering and really trying to do as opposed to reading or watching. Great.
We're running up on time. I did want to mention there was one question. The graduate course, you can you enroll, and then we review the application, and it's based on prerequisites and your background. So it is competitive, but it is an actual Stanford class, and it's not like applying to Stanford, right? It's not that competitive. Is there anything else you, Jay-Z, would want to add? We're in our last 2 minutes. Again, the biggest question we get are about preparing yourself for a product management role. Is there anything else? It may be something you wish you had done before you started your first PM role that you would want to share with everybody here.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why Anand and I have worked so hard to create these courses is because a lot of the learnings that we really wish we had when we started off our careers, we wanted to actually put down for the next, all the other folks who are trying to make that transition or starting to learn about product management. Sorry, just hit the mute button. But that's why we created these courses, because we wanted to, all the things we actually, if we were to go back in time and say, what did you wish you knew back when you first started, when you were trying to make the transition, when you're in your first couple of years of product management, what we've created really tries to capture that essence. So I would say some of that. The other thing is, I would say, a community. So one of the best things, one of the best ways to continue to strive towards what you're hoping to do is to find other people who are also trying to make the same transitions, who are potentially going through some of these struggles as a new PM. They're trying to learn these things. And what you get with that community, with more people that you can talk to, is you can get more reps in much faster. So instead of you sitting alone with your kind of problem and your users, if you find other people, maybe it's through communities like this, you can actually see what people are struggling with and see those reps like more frequently, and then learn from even how other people are doing it. So the last piece, beyond just all the stuff that we've kind of boiled down, is that community aspect and finding like partners that you want to keep in touch with, that you can check back in with on their journey and their learnings as PMs. Both new PMs, but also, mentors who are a little more experienced, a few years beyond where you want to be.
Great, and we are at time. I want to do it, Anand. I want to give you a chance to have the last word. I did want to address a question about the graduate live class. It's not in person. It is a remote class. The lectures are recorded during the sessions, and then you can, if I remember right now, the way it's set up, you watch the lectures after the fact. You don't need to participate live, but there is group work that you would then be doing every week, keeping up with the class on that. So it is the actual class being broadcast to students.
That's right.
Anand, is there anything you want to add? Last word you want to get in on this session?
Yeah, I'll add one about practice being a great writer. It's always been great PMs spend a third of their time talking, a third of their time listening, and a third of their time writing. And there are infinite opportunities to practice being a great writer. Everybody writes emails, everybody writes documents. Take a moment and practice the craft of writing. Being a persuasive, clear, and concise, with an emphasis on concise communicator, is a totally critical skill, and it's a thing you can do in any job, anywhere.
That's a great ending to it. So Anand, Jay-Z, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you everyone who joined us. We didn't get to all the questions. We will undoubtedly be doing another webinar at some point with Anand and Jay-Z, and so there'll be more opportunities to learn from them. And thank you again, everybody. We really appreciate you being here.